G'day Year 10 Health students. Hope you're going okay. I know that this is strange. Again, we're back into remote learning. Hopefully it's just for these next couple of days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And we'll be back at school on Thursday. Now I know that on our timeline, we have scheduled our outcome task for this week. And I've been talking to Mr. Tyler's class and Mr. Tyler and making sure that both classes are up to a very similar point and ready to do that outcome task. The other thing that I've done is had a good chat to Mr. Tyler about the outcome task to ensure that you're given the right opportunity to provide us with a satisfactory result. So a couple of decisions have been made. We're going to begin the outcome task in our last lesson of this week, which for us is our Thursday class period 2, but you will have 2 lessons to complete the outcome task. We've also modified the outcome task compared to what it would have been if we were just at school and completing this as a closed book outcome task. So you're going to have access to the internet, you're going to have access to all your resources, and we've just given it as a slightly modified different task to complete. Okay, so the outcome task will be happening on Thursday of this week and finished on Monday of next week. Both classes dedicated to completing the outcome task. Now, in terms of what I want you to get done today, I want to complete the new content that is required to have all of the background knowledge about measuring health status finished from the PowerPoint we've been working through. So I'm going to guide you through in this video the last couple of items: the incidence, the prevalence, the years of life lost due to disability, burden of disease, and DALY, disability adjusted life years. Once I've gone through all 5 of those, the whole PowerPoint is completed. There's a few additional parts to the end about socio-cultural, which we'll move into the next topic, okay? And maybe even a hint towards what the outcome task might be if you read the research on health conditions task. So, hopefully this information is helpful to you. Once you finish going through this, feel free to come and ask me any questions. A Zoom will be available for you, okay? But you don't have to use it if you don't need to. I just need either an email or for you to come on the Zoom so I can mark you present for this lesson. Here goes. During today's lesson, the information that you're going to need is under our Year 10 Health Compass page, over in the Resources tab. If you open up our Year 10 Health, Term 1, we're going back to Week 2, and we've got this PowerPoint here, Australian Health. The other item I'm going to direct your attention to is this measurement and indicators glossary once we've completed this task. So, just as a very, very quick refresher, we were talking about the health status of Australians and Australia. In order to do that, we need to understand how to measure the health status of an individual or a population. When we are measuring health status, there are a few common terminologies and new words that we needed to understand and build into our repertoire, which we've done very slowly across the last week to try and make everyone comfortable with this new language. So we spoke about a continuum. We spoke about understanding that health can move across the continuum. You can go from high levels of health and living for very long years lifespan and reaching the expected life expectancy, or premature death from things like chronic disorders or doing things the wrong way. I ask you to draw the health continuum and give examples. And then we looked at the different health status indicators, which we've been working our way around. So the first one was about assessing your own health, self-assessed health status. And that one was pretty easy and straightforward for people to understand, that people make their own assumption about how healthy they are on their own self-assessment. Next, we looked at life expectancy. At what age do we expect to live to? And if a country has a higher life expectancy, or an individual does based on their choice of lifestyle, that is a good thing and a positive and a healthy item, whereas a lower life expectancy is a negative. We looked at a few things going across the years about how life expectancy had changed and how to read tables and data and information. And then we discussed death. And when we discuss death, we use the word mortality. And we look at death per 100,000 people across a 12-month period. In that, we looked at what the mortality rates were per age group and per gender. When we were doing that, we were also able to look at the difference between the males and female ratio and how more males appear to have more mortality rate than females. So we looked at what are the leading causes. We looked at injuries and poisoning, and we spoke about things like alcohol consumption and risk taking, which you've learnt in Year 9 Health and Year 8. We moved on to trends and how to read graphs and looking at general movements and patterns, and we looked at these graphs in particular, where we were looking at the decrease in this mortality rate, which showed an increase in health. So having more people pass away per 100,000 in the 1970s compared to 2014 shows how healthcare has improved and made us a healthier country. Then I asked you to look at these graphs and find two trends. The trend that males were more overweight or obese than females, and also the fact that in inner regional, outer regional, and remote Australia, both males and females were more overweight or obese compared to the major inner cities. In our last lesson together, we looked at years of life lost, YLL, and a measurement of how this is premature death. And if somebody dies years before their life expectancy, then they have years of life lost. And a higher years of life lost is a more negative health status measure. And we looked at some of the major causes in different age groups of the years of life lost status. Finally, the last thing that we did was we look at morbidity, and I know this was one of the hardest ones so far because it's referring to living with disease, injury, or disability. And I think that the information from today's lesson will help you out here. So, here are some new pieces of information, and remember the pencil icon means take some notes. When we use the word incidence, we're often referring to morbidity or disease, injury, illnesses, and disabilities. So incidence is how many new cases of a condition have been reported within 12 months. Now I know we spoke about this in class the other day, but we didn't officially put the word incidence with it. So incidence is very helpful in identifying what is increasing in diagnosis and which ones are decreasing, and this helps allocate very useful health resources. So if we have a look at the table of information over here, and we're looking at 10 to 14 year olds, we are looking at the number of people per 1,000 that were diagnosed with this condition in that year. So for every 1,000 people in the age of 10 to 14, 6.8 were diagnosed with asthma. For every 1,000 people in the age of 15 to 19 males, 33 diagnosed with back and neck pain. But what we need to understand here is that there isn't 1,000 males in an age category. There is a much larger number. So we need to actually take this number per 1,000 and actually work out with multiplication per the actual amount of people in that category how much incidence is actually occurring, because this 6.8 per 1,000 is a rate. But if we want the actual incidence of how many people, what we need to do is we need to take that rate per 100,000, divide it by 1,000, sorry, 1,000, not 100,000, and then take that number and multiply it by the number of people in that category. So if I go back, if I wanted to know how much asthma was actually being diagnosed in 10 to 14-year-old males, I would take my 6.8, I would divide it by that 1,000, and then I would multiply it by how many males are in the age of 10 to 14. And when I get that, it will give me the actual number of how many new cases were diagnosed in that year. The next item we need to take notes about moves on from incidence and talks about prevalence. How prevalent is a condition? Prevalent talks about the total number of cases of a condition, not just how many new cases. It is how many of the older cases are still there and being carried over, and add that to how many new cases. So if I flip down this PowerPoint here, the rate of prevalence for each condition can be calculated if we know the size of that population. So in 2017, there were 715,500 females in the 10 to 14 age category, and 77,277 females suffered from asthma. We can complete a divide by 1,000, take that answer and divide the amount of people with asthma by that new number to find out how many actual cases per 100,000. Because per 1,000, if we are then able to look at the number of people who have asthma and the number of people who were diagnosed with asthma, we can see whether this growth is continuing to increase or we have a decrease in the growth in the number of asthma cases. If you're struggling with these multiplications and divisions, please don't stress too much. What's really important is that you understand that incidence is the number of people who are reporting that they've been diagnosed with a condition in that 12 months per 1,000, and prevalence is how much is still around plus the new diagnosis. Now we move on to how many years of our life are lost due to the diagnosis of disability. So when somebody is diagnosed with a disability, disease, or illness, they will continue to live their life. However, their actual life might change drastically in what they are capable and able to do. So they're not living their fullest life all the way through to their life expectancy. So YLD is how many years of your life was lost due to the disability, but you were still living. So it's actually the impact of what morbidity can have on a group of people or a population. Both YLL and YLD, years of life lost and years lost due to disability, are both worth 1 calendar year. However, while YLL is premature death, YLD is losing healthy years while living with illness. So, in the 10 to 14-year-olds in that same year of 2017, the following diagnoses were made, and these people continued to live their life. However, they were potentially not able to live their life in a regular status due to their diagnosis of disease, disability, or illness. That is their YLD. If they continue to live for the next 20 years, then they would have 20 YLD. And then if these people passed away, we would calculate from that point until their life expectancy, their YLL. So the YLD for 15 to 19-year-olds changes slightly, and what's interesting is what you can see here is the difference in these numbers, and I can see that mental and substance use disorders from 10 to 14-year-olds is 32%, and when we move up to 15 to 19-year-olds, that increases to 41%, so some of these others must be decreasing to keep that pie at 100%, and I know after having discussions with students in this class that we are under a very, very good awareness of mental and substance abuse disorders. 2 final things. The burden of disease. When people carry disease, injury, illnesses, or disorders, we have a gap between where their health status should be at optimal health and where their current health status is. Sometimes there's a large burden of disease. And when a disease, injury, illness, or disorder is diagnosed, people are not able to live their regular life by a long way off where it was. And other times there is less of a burden of disease, and people's lives are only minor in terms of their change. What we do need to do, though, is look at what the adjusted life years would be if somebody has a disability, disease, illness. So what we actually do with this is we use a calculation called DALY, which is the disability adjusted life years. 1 year of healthy life lost due to illness and or death. This is calculated by looking at the YLL and the YLD. And if we add the two of these up, we will find out what the DALY is. So, somebody is born, they're expected to live to their regular life expectancy with no complications. Somebody is diagnosed with a disability. They live their life with that disability until they have the end of their life prematurely, potentially. We know that if there is premature death, that is YLL, years of life lost due to premature death. However, in those years where that person was living with a disability, injury, illness, they have YLD. And so if we add up the YLD and the YLL, we can work out what the disability adjusted life years, the DALY, is for any person who has met the end of their life early. I know this is a lot of information to take in, Year 10s, but what I'm really hopeful of is that as we go all the way through our list from self-assessed health status, life expectancy, mortality trends, the more that you're hearing about this every lesson, it becomes easier and easier. I know that things like morbidity, incidence, prevalence, DALY, YLD, burden of disease might be brand new to do in today's lesson. However, I'm hopeful that as we continue to use these words across the next few weeks, it becomes more and more second nature to you. If you open up that glossary document that I asked for earlier, you would notice that it looks just like this. Some of you might have already been using this glossary document, and that's fine and fantastic, and others might not have opened it as of yet. For the remainder of today's lesson, other than rereading over the PowerPoint and ensuring your notes are in good order and that you've finished the information from the PowerPoint, I think this would be a great way to see how much do I know. Try yourself in terms of closed book and not having notes with you, how many of these you would be able to fill in if it was a test. What information do you know about burden of disease? What words can you put into here? What definition can you give without reusing that? What is DALY? How is it calculated? When is it important for people? What does incidence mean? How do we calculate life expectancy, and what is it per? What is morbidity and what is mortality? And these two get so confused. What's the difference between the two? What is prevalence? What is YLD? And what is YLL? Try and complete this document without having your notes or computer there for you, and just see how you go. Zoom will be available if you need it. Don't forget to send me an email for the roll call as well. Good luck on today's lesson, and we'll have some more content on Wednesday with some brand new tasks and information prior to Thursday's outcome task. See you then.